welcome to the 905er podcast. I'm Roland Tanner.
I am Joel McLeod.
And today it's very much the sounds of the sump pump coming from my little basement anyway.
I can't hear it for what it's worth.
We've got torrential rain outside. I just got drenched and my sump pump is going full blast. So I'm sure it can only assist with the content about we're about to send your way. So obviously we just had an election, but we're going to start off by not talking about it because we've talked about it a lot. I dare say it will come in before we're done, but today is the first day of vaccine passports, or whatever the technical term for them is. And Joel, what's your thought about how this has all been rolled out?
Well, I thought it was a long time necessary. Over the summer, it became. I think you and I were talking about it offline, and everyone I talked to said there's no possible way, with the numbers being what they were, that we could figure out how we were not going to have a vaccine passport. You know, the point of this was to avoid future lockdowns, which again is all based on the science and the numbers of infections getting up there. But whereas before, you know, it's kind of hard to wrap your head around the timeline of all this and how it's unfolded. But if you remember, like back in the last lockdown, we didn't have vaccines. It was strictly masking and social distancing that was keeping us safe and keeping the numbers down. And the payoff for that was that restaurants and small businesses and the like were bearing the brunt of it. No ifs, ands, or buts. The vaccines come around, and it is a game changer because we saw, okay, we can figure out a way to make this happen, prevent the lockdowns because we would all be vaccinated. The problem was, how do you tell, the real problem is that you see the anti-vax and anti-mask crowd are really, they're holding us all back, is basically what it comes down to. I can't sugarcoat it. They're holding us back from getting into a real post-COVID-19 recovery. So that, you and I thought that there's no way, I can't figure out a way to keep this going without some kind of way of identifying who's vaccinated and who's not, and allowing those people to go into the restaurants, the small businesses, and kind of re-engage in a somewhat normal atmosphere, mostly to keep these businesses going. So I knew that they were going to come, and it was going to be going to happen. It's just the fact that Doug Ford was resistant to it for so long was just, I mean, come on, like Doug.
Thought, even Jason Kenney has caved now, and boy, has that guy got egg on his face this week. All the fine promises of the leading conservative premiers in this country have really come to naught, and everything they've said has proved to be wrong. I mean, it's I noticed that this is a 905 podcast, not an Alberta podcast, but in an election where nothing much changed, the Conservatives were down 13.5% in Alberta, which, if it wasn't for the fact that they are so hugely ahead, would have had more than significant effect. That's a big change in anywhere. It's just that our system doesn't necessarily immediately change colours, but it suggests that a lot of people are starting to see through that. And I mean, by delaying and humming and hawing about these things and then accepting that they had to happen, all you've done is now you've got a half-assed passport system because you're doing it late, you're doing it at the last minute. I mean, it seems to me that what it boils down to is basically the thing that we were given, the printout that we were given when we got our vaccines, just kind of provided in a slightly different format. I haven't actually been able to get the government website to work yet. So when I went out this evening, I just used, I had to use my vaccine certificate, and that seemed to work just fine. I think it probably has the same information on it. But,
well, it does. I guess the problem is, again, this is the theme of this government is, for the rest of us, it seemed like this was a pretty obvious course of action that was going to happen. There'd be some kind of marker on like on your health card or on your driver's license, some kind of identification that says I'm a fully vaccinated individual. And the fact that the government was so hesitant to do it, and then there's no, they slowly come around to the realization that everybody else said, like, we don't know another way. I'm open to any other viable option to do this, but I don't know. And so they said, it's just so frustrating. And they say, oh, okay, why you couldn't spend the summer coming up with a better plan than, remember those flimsy printouts that you got as an afterthought when you left your clinic? Yeah, let's use those instead. And it's embarrassing that this government just cannot come up with better solutions. From what I've been hearing, I heard a story on the radio about a teenage girl who was a waitress at a restaurant, and last night was kind of the last hurrah for the anti-vaxxers to get out and enjoy. And she's sitting there trying to tell them to put on masks and socially distance, and instead she's getting spit on and cussed out. And that's the problem. And the people who are vaccinated right now don't have them printed out, or there's no easy documentation, and it's just like it's kind of chaos at the moment. And that's the story of this government, right? Like the vaccine passport has been a chaotic rollout, and then the vaccine rollout was chaotic. I mean, remember back in March, April, and May, all of us, clicking refresh to find, where's a pharmacy or a hospital or a clinic that might have a dose for me. It's ridiculous.
And this is so unfair. It's so unfair on everybody. So for instance, I went to a restaurant this evening, did my vaccine passport thing. Obviously, a staff member has to be at the door to make sure. So they're having to deal with all this because there is no second, either they enforce it or nobody does. I heard from somebody tonight who was a scrutineer on election day, and they were there with scrutineers from the PPCs, who, of course, did not wear masks, and we can assume were not vaccinated. And that leaves it to the hardworking, but not trained to deal with confrontation, people who work in the polls, to either say, get the hell out, this is not on, or kind of, as I suspect happened, kind of look around at the people who are wearing masks and saying, are you okay to part with this, or do I have to make a stink? I believe what happened was that everybody just sort of rolled their eyes and just got on with it. But I mean, it's so damn unfair. We're doing what we're supposed to be doing, and these morons are putting us at risk, and we're supposed to just put up with it.
I suspect, the one thing that this I know we don't want to talk about the election, but it's recently. But the one thing I will say is it's really done a good job of kind of dividing the majority of Canadians from this minority. And I do say they're very much a minority. As much as they want to think that there's a huge army of these quote unquote enlightened individuals who are ahead of the curve or freedom fighters or whatever they want to call themselves, they're not. They're very much a minority. They're a rock around our necks from getting out of this thing. You and I, and I'm going to assume the majority of our listeners have gotten vaccinations. Majority of us are probably waiting for when our children are able to be vaccinated. I know I am. As soon as they prove it for children, I'll be. My wife and I have said, no, we're going to find out how to do it. We're going to take our kids down and get them vaccinated because that's the responsible thing to do. And our kids want to get it. It's just, we're tired of pulling these people through the mud. They're the ones dragging us down. And maybe I'm getting militant on this. Maybe I'm the one who's wrong here, and I'll leave it to history to judge. But I'm kind of like, let's cut them loose. I'm done arguing with them. I'm done trying to convince them. I'm done trying to educate them. At this point, the facts have been out there. Billions of people around the world have had some kind of a vaccine injected into them, and they are perfectly fine. It's it's incredibly frustrating to be having to negotiate with these knuckle draggers so that if we want to go to a pub to have a pint after this, or, sit down at a cafe, I want to do that. I want to go out and re-engage with in public, and I'm running out of patience for them. I just am. I can't.
And we're seeing. So in Burlington, we know there was at least one protest at Joe Brent Hospital. We're just talking about the local area, just happen to know it. And I know that those same people afterwards went and made a noise outside the mayor's house, which I really don't think. And what's it got to do with the bloody mayor anyway? I mean, it's not.
What's the point of protesting the hospitals? That's what I don't get. I
don't get it either.
Like that's I think what really turned the tide in the election was the image of them protesting hospitals and blocking ambulances from getting into their base to deliver patients to the hospitals, or spitting on cancer patients or dialysis patients as they're coming in and out for treatment, or people who have to go say their respects to a loved one who's in palliative care. Like this, that's despicable. And anyone who would even support that group of people and say, well, it's their right and they have a right. I'm sorry, that's just a despicable and low thing to do.
And we have to, and I'm asking the question here. I'm not saying I have an opinion. I know we have people listening to this podcast who are either in the police or a retired policeman or things like that. So, and I don't know, but I do see protests of people outside hospitals, which just seem to go ahead with no. And then there was a protest last week about the clearing of the homeless sort of encampments in Toronto, in which I think 5 people were arrested. Basically, people who had transgressed whatever, allegedly, obviously, on previous days at previous times. That the police thought, oh, these guys are going to be here, we'll turn up and arrest them all. I mean, I guess, whatever. I don't get it, but it's like, okay, if those guys are troublemakers and objectionable, then, I'm led to understand that blocking the entrance to a hospital is actually already a criminal offence. So why the hell are those guys? Yeah. Maybe there are good answers. I do not know. But I would like to hear those answers if they're out there.
You know what? I think the rest of us, those of us who vaccinated, those of us who spent a year cut off from family and friends, who saw our friends' businesses suffer because of the pandemic, and those of us who truly weathered this, the business owners, the small business owners, the people who lost hours on their jobs, who were legitimately scared of, will I make it out of this okay? Those of us who went and said, I'm getting my vaccine so I can reopen, I can reengage. I think we're just getting to the point where this is not, our patience is wearing thin. And you know what? All of us who are pro-vaccine, who are vaccinated, and there are many of us in this country, the number's 79.5% are double vaccinated. It's time for us to take this back and just say, no, we're not conceding the public space anymore. We're not carrying you anymore. You're on your own. You go back. The French President Emmanuel Macron said, you go back to your basements now. You're the ones who have to stay indoors now. The rest of us want to get out and live our lives again.
Yeah, and that anyone who thinks this is some kind of imposition of their liberties, no, your freedom is your freedom not to take that vaccine. No one's going to force it into your arms. There may be things that you can't do because you're not taking it. That's a very different concept. It's like I was saying the other day. Wrote an article on the website. It's like, well, at least the PPC, where they stand, and they're not trying to hide what they think about vaccination. I happen to very strongly disagree with them. But worse than that is this kind of thing of not even admitting your status. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm kind of confusing two different things there, but at the end of the day, you're free to have your dumb opinions, that's your right. That doesn't mean you get to just willy-nilly inconvenience the other 80% of the population. I mean, this really brings us on to the second point that we were going to talk about, and because it's very much related, because it is related to the PPC, and that is racism in Hamilton.
Mm-hmm.
And we've known for a while that racism is a bit of a problem. Hamilton's sometimes been described, rightly or wrongly, as kind of the national centre for the far right. We certainly both noticed on election night that Stony Creek's People's Party candidate, was significantly ahead of the national average in terms of the votes he was getting. Current count is 8%. I know on the night it was closer to 10%. So it's come down somewhat. Looking at the other ridings, where I think some of the we're looking at 6%. Nationally, the PPC got about 5%. Well, across the region, we're running ahead of the average in many ways.
Well, the reason why I wanted to kind of touch upon this is a story that came out during at the start of the election, and we never had a chance to actually go to it. And I'd always thought, okay, this will be something we'll follow up with post-election. There's an article in the CBC that on August 4th by Desmond Brown titled 2 years after launch, Hamilton Anti-Hate Coalition says racism still prevalent. And basically talk about No Hate in the Hammer, saying that there's a lot of work left to be done to combat hate and racism in Hamilton. And it's this is a story that we thought we'd come back, but we saw the kind of the reality, the numbers come up during the election. When you and I were looking at Hamilton East Stony Creek, they just said, like, why is this candidate, this party, getting such support there?
Yeah. And just throw into the mix some of the other Niagara ridings are way up there. There's Haldeman Norfolk actually is 11%.
That I'm not surprised at. I drove through Haldeman Norfolk a bit during the election, and the number of PPC signs you see on people's property is, I thought that they would have come in second. I mean, there's a big, I mean, it kind of allowed you to kind of all those, any anger or division that you have that you want to indulge in, that party kind of let you do it and again in that typical polite Canadian fashion, because it's just a political opinion. That's it. But I mean, let's be honest with the PPC, aside from being anti-mask and anti-vaccination, are also virulently anti-immigrant and anti-multiculturalism. Basically, I kind of phrase them as the anti-party. If there's something that is kind of well in this country, they have a problem with it, and it's if you look, it's not just this, but if you look back on Hamilton over the years, I mean, we had Cameron Crush on one of our earliest episodes, and we've had on Graham Crawford with I Elect Hamilton to discuss them, and it's kind of been a theme of just it's the dirty secret of Hamilton that everybody knows exists, but nobody wants to deal with, because either it's, again, we don't talk about that in polite conversation, or you're going to end up pissing off some people, and you might end up pissing off people who might cost you a chance at re-election or a chance at election. And that's a bad calculation to make, maybe.
Yeah, and it's worrying. It's a worrying undercurrent. I think we can say that. I think as in the US, and I keep on saying, this is no excuse for racism, that's for sure. It's no excuse for far right behavior, but there is a link between working class frustration and disempowerment and feeling of being abandoned. Like you say, these are people who are anti because they feel outside society. I don't know. I mean, I think there's a feeling of we are being treated like, rightly or wrongly, and I think vast majority of the time wrongly, we are victims. It's a culture of victimhood, and this isn't fair. We're gonna fight back whatever the needs, and we need to get to the bottom of that feeling of victimhood. With so much of what we've talked about. I mean, the murders in London of the Muslim family, the confrontations that happened in Hamilton at the Pride event, where the far right turned up, and the fallout from that. We're seeing it again and again, and yeah, I mean, it's easy to say, and goodness knows we've both said it. These people are objectionable, and it's very difficult to be sympathetic to them. However, we do need to, with every problem that society has, you have to find the cause. So understanding the cause is different from saying, "Oh, poor things, we need to understand them." There was an attitude after 9/11 I was very aware of at the time. I had some friends who were from the US, and I can remember someone actually saying this to me. It's like, we don't want to understand them, we want to kill them. And that was the phrase. It's like, no, however awful your opponent may be, you need to understand what is making them act the way they do, because somewhere there'll be some kind of logic to it. And I think that's what we need to do here. Why would 10% of the population turn to something like that?
I think I'm going to spitball here, and I think it's a lack of options in life, and what I mean by that is when you see your opportunities for social mobility start to dry up, when you've been told, go into this line of work, do this, you're going to be safe for life, you'll be able to make a living, support your family, all that stuff, and you see those options start to dry up, and you see options to better your life escaping or not materializing. It's easy to kind of go down that hole, and especially when you have somebody saying let's not actually look at the causes, which are varied. We're talking other thing. A lot of it comes down to economic capabilities. Just if and those aren't easy answers. There's no magic fix for it. But when you see that, it's easy for somebody to come and say, yeah, your problem isn't economic disparity. It's not wage inequality. It's not gender inequality. It's not a lack of innovation in the economy or a lack of access to education, all of which are very complicated solutions. It's easy to come in and say, no, it's that group of people over there. It's those people who just arrived. They're the ones taking your jobs. They're the ones who are changing your
It's a very attractive argument, and yeah, I mean, people throughout history, the worst kind of politician has seen that the appeal of that, or how powerful that can be, because you've got people who are frustrated and feel that they're not getting ahead in life, and they can either say, okay, it's because I'm personally a failure, or they can think, oh, it's that guy's fault. But naturally, most people are going to go for the second answer. Right?
I mean, like we say that, but here's the other side of that equation. We know that you'll get people like the Maxime Berniers of the world and the Donald Trumps of the world who will capitalize on it and stoke those fears and just get people into a white rage against people who don't look like them. But it's also up to progressives. And this is, again, as we're coming into an election, it comes up to the Jagmeet Singhs and the Justin Trudeaus of the world who wrap themselves in the progressive flag to say, no, we actually need to engage with actual social policies to address these issues, which means better options for re-education, for new careers. It means a better safety net so that you're not stuck on the bottom rung all the time. You actually have a chance, or your kids have a chance to advance. It means that we have to start investing in people. Things, it's one of the things that during the campaign, and I'm sorry I'm bringing it up again, but I will. One of the things that I liked was that at the start of the campaign, we were actually talking about housing. And it was so refreshing that every party actually had, I thought, a good aspect of how to address this complex issue. And I was, part of me wondering, we're in a minority. Part of me wonders, like, couldn't we find some way to take like all those aspects, you know, the conservative market strategy and the New Democrats' pension to, you know, to fund social housing development, and, you know, can we find a way to kind of bring those together in one big bill to actually start tackling this and start giving people security of, hey, I'm okay here. And this isn't an overnight thing that's going to solve it, but, you know, it's not enough just to say, oh yeah, that guy likes to blame immigrants or blame people who have a different skin color or worship a different God. Let's blame that's what he does. Shame on him. We know what the problem is. Now we have to provide the solution to the problem. And that's where I think progressives are failing, truth be told.
Yeah. I think progressives should be willing to work together much more. They should be willing to compromise much more. And we have, you know, and I'm going to quote Andrew Coyne, who's one of those people who some days I think doesn't know what he's talking about in the remotest sense, or some days he just nails things in a way that few other people do. And he said, you know, the general situation in Canadian elections now is that the vast majority of people voting at every election lose. Feel they lost. It's like, well, I voted for this guy, they didn't win. Mm-hmm. So, you know, if you've already got a situation where people are becoming more radical, where people are feeling disenfranchised in whatever way, and then you say, oh, by the way, your vote's never going to count, and you can vote for any of these parties and you're probably not going to win. And, you know, we're asking for trouble, right? And I think, you know, and the other thing is, I was talking with someone tonight about, you know, look at the issues from previous elections that sort of, you know, that characterized elections. So you had with Mulroney, it was NAFTA. And, you know, should we have free trade or not? We had HST, I guess, with Chrétien. You know, these were big issues. In previous elections before that, with Pearson or whatever, we would have had healthcare and you know, and the Pierre Elliott Trudeau's era. Obviously, there were, you know, big issues that were being discussed. We've simultaneously not got those kind of massive debates happening. You know, even if you take the NDP as the furthest left and the Conservatives as the furthest right, I can't think of anything that that kind of fundamental, we're going to do this big thing and right. We're saying this big thing is a bad idea. You know, it's all fuzzing around with the details. And you kind of feel like, you know, if one of say the Liberals has said, basic income, we're going to go for it. We're going to do basic income, or we're going to do, like the Ontario Liberals did, we're going to do a national trial in 10 cities or something, a really big scale trial to see if it's going to work. That could have been the kind of issue that could really dominate an electoral
that's what conversation. That's what we were talking about during election night was, you know, if Trudeau was going to call the election, the kind of the justification, he'd have to provide some kind of a reason why, right? Like to me, the thought would always have been, okay, Jessica says, to get out of this pandemic, I think we have to implement this massive program, but the only way I could do it responsibly is to ask for a mandate from the people.
Yeah, if you want a majority, ask for something that warrants a majority.
Right.
Like that.
I don't want to muck around with the details. I don't want to, you know, we can't. I know exactly what we need. We need this program, and the program's going to look like this. It's going to work like that. But to do it, I need the buy-in of the people, and I need a majority so I can just get it through. And, you know, maybe the people would have awarded him. I said, okay, okay, we need that. Let's make it work.
And that would have been a fundamental thing that could have, well, it would have appealed to a bunch of people, and it would have really turned off a bunch of people. But you would have had a result, you know.
Yeah.
And I think it's my feeling is that you probably, you know, they could have done it, but you know, it's taking a nerve.
I guess our prescription of post-election, what needs to happen in this country going forward is, that PPC is a minority, but it's there, and it can be stomped out now while it's in its infancy, where it's still weak, and we don't treat it as as just another opinion. It's destructive, and to do it, all the political parties need to say it compromise to invest in people, tell people we're going to look out for you. We got your backs, and that's going to be a big way to start nipping this stuff in the bud, as they say.
Yep, and I know I'm an electoral reform bore, so I apologise to everybody that I bore with it, and I will keep this super short. But yeah, all of that, and then the day after an election, you have to have more than 50% of the people who voted feeling that they voted for the guy that won in some way or other. Not necessarily the guy that won, but the people who are going to form the government. Because right now, around just shy of 70% of Canadians woke up on Tuesday morning having voted for someone other than the winner, the so-called winner. What do you reckon? We could go on for one more story. I've got one lined up, but we're already at the 30-minute mark.
Let's give people a break. They listened to us for 3 hours on Monday.
Yeah.
They need a break. They need some rest from our weary prognostications.
I'm with you guys. Yeah, absolutely. I'm all for that. Well, thanks everybody who has listened. We really appreciate those people who tuned in on Monday, whether you listened for 10 minutes or an hour or a couple of hours. We were really pleased at the people who took part. And with every episode, we're delighted to have you along, and we try and keep it as succinct and to the point as possible some of the time. And
if you liked what we did on Monday, we'll probably do it again, no doubt, for the next provincial election. But consider joining our Patreon, or if you don't want to do the subscription, go to our buy me a coffee page. Links are in the show notes, and help support us and keep the lights on at 905er headquarters. We'll continue to keep doing this and keep trucking along.
I've got to keep the power going to that sump pump, otherwise we'll be flooding down here. No, we really appreciate it, and we have all kinds of things that we like to do if we have some money in the bank. I mean, some huge stories that need professionals to look at them, and we appreciate everything that our listeners do already, and encourage you to consider it if you haven't done so far.
All right, let's leave it at that. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns, or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.
Looking to make the most out of this life and optimize your personal wellness? Then check out the Natural Man Podcast. Join me, host Mike C., as we explore all areas of human wellness, physical, mental, and emotional. Learn strategies to optimize your own well-being and be in the driver's seat of your own health. Remember, your doctor works for you. Learn biohacks, neurohacks, ways to improve sleep, and ways to optimize your body and your mind. Check us out on Apple, Spotify, the Fountain app, and at naturalmanpodcast.com.